Vroom, vroom. This race, 40 years ago, was to celebrate the Type 35, which was made in 1924, and it was 60 years since they'd made the Type 35. Well, the one this weekend is 100 years since they made the 35, because it's 1924 was the first Type 35. I'm under this video which David Heimann gave me years ago, because obviously coming second you'll see the race. He was very keen to have the video, and so he gave it to me. But the reason I'm thinking about it is Timothy, my son, is actually at Monaco with another very good customer, very much like David Heimann, and he's driving the ex-Elizabeth unit car, and, you know, Tim's been working on it, we've been going testing, blah, blah, blah. But this was 40 years ago, the video, and of course the other thing about it all is, which is sad in some ways, there are a lot of people in this video that ain't with us anymore. But, you know, I suppose that's life really, it's a miracle I'm with us. In the video you'll see a man mentioned called Uwe Hucke, who actually organised the race, because he lived just in, I think he lived in Monaco, and he was a member, I think he was a prominent member of the Monaco car club or whatever, and it was through him pushing it that we managed to have that all Bugatti race, because this weekend it ain't all Bugattis, but I've heard that at the moment we're third on the grid behind an ERA and a Maserati, which don't sound bad. Let's hope the luck keeps going. But anyway, so Uwe's a smashing bloke. I got to know him later on very well, and his daughter, who was absolutely beautiful, I might add. And quite funny really, because you'll see the four-wheel drive car. So I'm at Nürburgring with another customer, and Angela was due to drive the four-wheel drive round the Nürburgring, you know, just a little circuit. So she's arrived and she said, come in the car with me. She said, just come down to the collecting area, you know, when I said, yeah, all right, Angela. So I get in the car, and I said, I'm in the passenger seat, and Angela's driving the four-wheel drive, right, which is a bit of a fierce thing, I might add, but anyway, and it wasn't leaking oil by now, because this is years later. But anyway, so we drive down. So I said, okay, no, Ivan, stay here, stay with me, keep me company, because, you know, anyway, she managed to keep me in the car. Next thing you know, she's rolling towards going out on the track, and I'm going, hang on, and she said, oh, and she absolutely conned me into being with her, driving around the Nürburgring, which, to be honest, I didn't really care, but I couldn't see, because I didn't have a windscreen. So she had them really leery sunglasses, you know, that fit like people wear. So she took her sunglasses off, because she's got a windscreen, and gave them to me like that. So now we're going around the Nürburgring, and she's driving, and I said, no, Angela, you want to be over here. So I'm pulling the steering wheel, and I'm saying, get on that bit there, right. Now you want to be hitting that bit over there. And she drove beautifully. She did everything I told her, and it turned out to be really good. But anyway, in the video you'll see that David Heimann approached Mido, who made the original watch that Bugatti used to give to racing drivers and people like that. So anyway, he had, I think it was 45 watches made, and he gave one to Prince Rainier, he gave one to Uwe Hucke, he gave one to Venables, who won the race, and he gave one to Lord Raglan, because it was Lord Raglan's car. So then, that was it really. So after it was all over, he actually gave me one as well. So I had one of them. So they're clockwork. They're not clockwork. They've got a battery, but they're the nearest thing you can get to the real thing. And they were made of 18 karat gold, so they're very nice. And that is a real one. This one here was owned by Elizabeth Unick, which is a terrible, funny coincidence, because her car is the car we're looking after, which is a young bloke's driving at Monaco now, and that's Unick's signature, and that is the date when it was, I think that was the first time she'd had any real success in a hill climb or something, and obviously Ettore gave it to her. and I bought it years later from a man from Czechoslovakia, as it happens. So there we are. So that was that. So there we are. So in the end, because I got to know Uwe very well, a very nice man, been into Bugattis for donkey's years, collected loads of cars and loads of bits, and he had a load of knowledge as well, because, you know, when he was younger, he used to go and, you know, he used to go to where the factory was, and he used to talk to the old mechanics and things like that. And a couple of times I said, you know, when we do it like this, and he said, well, you won't believe it, he said, but I spoke to a mechanic at the factory, an ex-mechanic of the factory, he said, and they used to do exactly the same thing. So, you know, he was a very knowledgeable man. For David Heimann was the first man to have any real confidence in me as a mechanic and as a whatever, but I mean, he was fabulous. He was a very good customer, turned out to be a friend. Best advice probably I've ever had in my life was from David Heimann. And of course, we were making a name for ourselves, and I think this video justifies the fact that we did very well. You'll see in the video that David comes second. Well, I made sure he had brand spanking new tyres. The car was on methanol, it was not missing, it did everything proper. And all the kiddies, they were all there, all the people that should have won. And David Heimann managed to come second behind Sir John Venables. To a certain extent, I think John Venables was lucky, because Martin Morris was in the Trebor car, and he was very good, Martin Morris. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but I know exactly what happened. I mean, they played around with the clutch between practice and the race. And with a Bugatti clutch, it's very, very, very critical on adjustment. And I think what happened was, the clutch, although it was probably adjusted properly, after a few laps, it wasn't. So he had to stop and have his clutch adjusted, but he was miles in the lead. And I think it would have been I think Martin Morris would have won, to be honest with you, but that's neither here nor there. He didn't win, but that is the story behind him. He had to have the clutch adjusted. Lots of people were all over the shop, as you'll see. Alan, Dick Cadney, and they was all there. And I remember standing on the start line with David Heimann, and I said, right, David, when the flag goes through, you want to go straight through there. And he said, but that is so-and-so. And I said, don't worry about them. You know, just do it. And he did ever so well. I mean, he had my helmet on, because he had one of them helmets with the glasses and everything. I said, you don't want that in the pouring rain, you want a full face. So anyway, he put my helmet on, and he did ever so well. And he comes second, and, you know, it really cemented the thing that Ivan Dutton must know what he's doing. And, you know, the business has gone on, and we won't believe it, but that was 40 years ago. You won't even recognise John Berry. And Neil Davis is there, you see old Neil. It was a fabulous, we all went, it was a family outing. We took the big old blue van that David Heimann bought with an awning on. We had an awning made for it. And me, Mary, John Berry, Neil Davis and my Tim, we all went down to Monaco. It was absolutely brilliant, and obviously coming second, old David was absolutely knocked out. And he gave me the video, so I thought, well, I'll just stick my neck out and put it on the channel, because I'm sure you'll all love to see it. And it was fabulous seeing old David, because he was half a good bloke. It was marvellous seeing John Berry, because he can't even recognise it. He said, no, I don't think that is me. Well, I'm sure it is him. But you'll all have a good laugh. I mean, we've got the whole video, you know, right from the word go, but, you know, we thought we'd put on the bit that we know about, and I thought everybody would really enjoy it. But, you know, I mean, we'll see. But you'll see they was really in trouble in the wet, you know, they were all sliding all over the shop. And when I raced in saloons, I used to know a man, I think he worked for Avon, and he used to design the treads on the Avon tyres. He was a Frenchman, Jean Mounier, I think it might have been his name. But anyway, he used to design the treads. And he used to race a little, every now and again he'd race a Ford Escort. And I used to talk to him, and he said to me, when you go out in the wet, you want to go out with brand new tyres. He said, none of that bedding them in, nothing. If it's absolutely streaming, the tyres want the pips on them. And so when we went to Monaco, luckily I said, because having done the saloon car racing, I knew all about that. When you go out in the pouring rain, you want the best tyres. So I said to David, I will have to have another set of wheels made to have brand new tyres on. And David Heimann, of course, again, he didn't even question it. If I said it, he'd go, yeah, okay, Ivan, get it done, you know. So we had a complete set of wheels with brand new tyres on. So when he had his little bump in practice, I had a bit of a go at him about that, because, you know, he was so worried about looking after his family and getting them all in the pits and all that. And I'm thinking, you should be thinking about driving the car. And after he went into the bank, I wouldn't say I told him off, but I did say to him, look, tomorrow when it's, you know, you've got to be really thinking about it, you know. And of course he went to bed early and everything, so, and he did fabulously well. So that's what this is all about. And I'll be dead interested to hear your comments, and don't forget to subscribe.
So we go into the pits for the cars to form up before they go out for the final practice session. Here Rodney Felton talks to Martin Morris. They're going to be top contenders in this race, and there's no doubt about it that the mixture of the usual historic drivers and people like the ex-world champion Phil Hill and Maurice Trintignant is going to make for a lot of interest. Would you not agree, Martin?
And certainly it will make a very interesting race, or it certainly should do, because there are at least 5 drivers in this race who could easily win.
So then, everybody wondering how this race is going to turn out. And we look down at the cars as they prepare to go out. There's Murray Smith's four-wheel drive Bugatti again. Very rare car, that. That's Nick Mason pumping up his fuel pressure, and all excitement mounting now before led out of the paddock by number 1, Martin Morris. Away they go, followed by number 11, Rodney Felton. 33 is Murray Smith. A gap to 28 there, Maurice Souze. 29 rather. Then it's the 16-cylinder car of John Howell there going through, a very rare beast that. 28 follows up then, that's Patrick Marsh. Then number 9, Nick Mason going through, having pumped up that fuel pressure. Then we've got
Bob Sutherland driving the 37A, followed by Giuseppe Medici in the 35A.
number 8, Dieter Helderbosch. 32, Marc Blanc, followed by 31, Richard Wills. 17, John Venables Llewellyn. 30 is Hamish Moffat following close on his heels. Then 12, Hugh Conway Jr. goes through. 21 is Helmut Schellenberg. Then 18, Martin Dean. Number 2 is Phil Hill, the ex-world champion. Number 10 is Peter Agg. That's followed by number 5, Maria Teresa de Filippis, the only lady to compete in the Monaco Grand Prix, the 250F Maserati. 22, David Heimann. 7, Alan de Cadenet. And 4, Jeffrey St. John. And all the cars now out on the circuit for this final practice. Superb sunshine and superb Bugatti sounds echoing across the walls and across the waters of Monaco. As Martin Dean goes out of sight with the car smoking, through comes the Type 35, and we look at an incident here to poor David Heimann, who has gone off, in fact, and bent a steering arm and a wheel as well. Rather a pity that, as through goes another car with a dent in the tail. And look at this, the four-wheel drive car really showing that the front is fighting the back. Watch the tyres. Almost rolling off there on the near side front. Very spectacular indeed. And there, round the outside, number 9, Nick Mason, trying very hard indeed there to get himself a good practice time, get himself well in on the grid. Beautiful sunshine. Through again, that ex-Martin Dean car. What can you tell me about that one, Martin?
Well, it's the first Grand Prix Bugatti I had. It was the 4-cylinder supercharged Type 37A. I sold it many years ago to Bob Sutherland, who was having a lot of fun with it.
So a lot of cars trying very hard indeed to establish a good practice time. Dean once again with that quickest Bugatti of them all, because that car gives somewhere in the region of 485 brake horsepower. Compare that with a modern Grand Prix car. Of course, it's supercharged as opposed to turbocharged, and the capacity that much bigger. Number 12 there going through, Hugh Conway Jr. And a big effort there also by Patrick Marsh. The Marsh brothers, of course, involved in historic racing for a very long time. They have ERAs as well as Bugattis. Martin Morris goes through, followed by Richard Pilkington, concentrating very hard. And there we get the four-wheel drive car all crossed up there. Very spectacular on the part of Murray Smith, and a lot of smoke, and that looks like oil smoke to me, and indeed there is an oil flag out on the circuit. Cement dust, that's a product of British Marshals. Cement dust to deal with oil goes back to the 30s, and obviously that's soaking it up quite nicely as the Marsh car goes through. We looked in fact at these cars earlier on and tried to guess who was likely to win this race as up goes an arm and Peter Agg decides to go to the pits. What do you reckon, Martin?
Well, it's very difficult to know, but there are at least 5 cars, I think, who've got a jolly good chance of winning this race. Martin Morris, Jefferson John, Rodney Felton, and probably John Venables Llewellyn. There were certainly 4 cars, possibly Bernard Kane making a 5th. One of those will almost certainly win this race.
Well, Hamish Moffat there with a worried face and some smoke coming from the underneath of the car, but I don't think there's anything untoward there as the car is checked over, and some beautiful shots there with the sunlight on the cars, and quite obviously a great deal of fun in store for enthusiasts and non-enthusiasts alike. Care of concern here shown in the face of a French driver as Helmut Schellenberg prepares to go out in the Type 35C. On go the gloves because we're coming to the end of the practice session, as out also goes Pat Marsh. Obviously he's looking to establish a good time as well, and a huge crowd obviously enjoying this practice immensely as they can really see the drivers at work, and that of course is the big change now as we look at a rather changed Bugatti. Now just what's happened here?
Well, I think he's hit the Armco or the wire fencing rather hard and has broken his track rod. I suspect he's got a broken wheel as well. Sadly, he'll have to be put back on the lorry and taken back to the paddock.
Well, a rebuilding job to be done there, quite obviously, as far as David Heimann is concerned. He's not looking too worried about it. And there's a thumbs up sign there from David Heimann, which shows that he is, quite frankly, unworried that the car can be prepared, although it's fair to say that there's been a fair amount of drama during the course of the practice session, and looking after historic cars of this type, in fact, is a full-time job pretty well. A lot of the owners doing the maintenance themselves. Let's have a look at our rather special car here, this 4.7-litre car of Martin Dean's. A beautifully turned out engine, certainly looking to give all the power that we know that it does. And from that we move to a man who's in rather dire distress. This is Peter Agg. And what's happened here, Martin?
Well, he seemed to have spun in the tunnel, and from what I understand, his fuel tank has broken loose. This is actually mounted on some wooden stretchers.
Well, this is going to give some timber merchant locally a nice little bit of nighttime work to find a bit of ash or elm that's going to do that job properly. While all that's going on, there's time for 1 or 2 other people to enjoy themselves thoroughly as Peter Agg looks worried. That's far from the case with 1 or 2 other people out on the water there. They can enjoy life while others work to get themselves into the race tomorrow. The calm sea, the beautiful sunshine, and an opportunity to see the Mediterranean at its best, even if you're supposed to be working. But that's neither here nor there. Let's have a look, however, a little further into David Heimann's problems. A few moments ago, you may recall that we saw him sitting rather disconsolately by the side of the road. Just what happened?
David, you take your Type 51 out for second practice here at Monaco, and we don't see you come around the first time. What happened?
Well, lack of concentration and stupidity. But fortunately, at least it happened on the slowest part of the course at about 5 miles an hour. And I tried to go round the hairpin by using the throttle to steer the car instead of turning it harder, as it were. And I lost I just lost it and drove straight into the Armco very slowly and bent the steering arm, and that was the end, I'm afraid.
There's some frantic activity going on in the background here. What exactly have they got to do to get you ready for the race?
Well, I'm not too good on the mechanical side of all of this, but they've basically got to replace the steering arm. And Ivan's got all the spare parts because he's very good at these things and he comes very well prepared, and he says he'll have it back together again in half an hour, and that, I hope, will be the end of that. We don't know what else has been done, but I shouldn't think it's anything else.
When you're out there driving this particular car, do you talk to yourself?
Yes. Yes, oh yes, absolutely. I have to talk to myself. I have to say, you know, second or brake or think about this corner or something like that. Yes, oh, definitely. In fact, I wasn't talking to myself when I did it, probably because I wasn't thinking about it all hard enough.
If you were trying to describe to someone what it feels like to drive this car, how would you sum it up?
Oh, it's marvellous, absolutely marvellous, because it's so, I think what the French would call nerveux. It's alive, as it were, and wonderfully fast and terrific. Lovely. I wish I could drive it better.
What is it, in fact, about Bugattis that interests you so much?
Well, they're the only kind of object I know that's crossed the barrier between mechanical things and art, and every piece on the car is unique. It's all different from other cars. Every little bit is beautifully made. Those bits that I've broken there, if you look at them, how beautifully designed they are, they're not only very functional and they work very well, but they are absolutely lovely things. And really, it's very difficult to describe. It's like a sort of disease, really, and you can see all the other people around here that have got the disease. Once you're a Bugatti man, you're really not interested in any other kind of car.
While David Heimann's men work on the engine, let's have a little look back in time to something rather special about Ettore Bugatti. Way long ago, when that first race was won in 1929, and thereafter, he had a watch made. He gave it to the team drivers, and a replica of that watch has been made to commemorate that occasion. Very few of these have been built, and the movement, of course, is different today. But here, Uwe Hucke takes delivery of his own personal Bugatti watch. And there's one of these in store for the winner of the Grand Prix de Voiture de Course Historique, made by the original manufacturer before. And so to 1984, and on a pouring wet day, Martin Dean takes the 59 Bugatti into the paddock. 1961 world champion Phil Hill drives car number 2, this Type 35C. Reversing out now is Patrick Marsh with his Type 35T. As Uwe Hucke looks on, he's got more cars in the race than anybody else. Tens of thousands of eyes search the sky for a break in the clouds. There isn't one. It looks set for a wet race. And people who yesterday were sunbathing on the beach are now sheltering under trees, as the drivers are, and their helpers under umbrellas. There's the 1931 winner, the ex-Louis Chiron car, now beautifully rebuilt after that incident in practice, in the hands of David Heimann. Some hard work has gone to bring this car onto the circuit. 17, Sir John Venables Llewellyn, followed by second fastest man in practice, Rodney Felton. Sir John Venables Llewellyn drives Lord Raglan's car and is known therefore as Le Petit Baron. This wet circuit is going to prove a trying situation for all the drivers, regardless of the age of the car, in both this race and in the Grand Prix to come. Martin Dean with the Type 59. The rest of the field following through with a four-wheel drive car, which in these conditions should show up extremely well. But there are worried faces, not just among the drivers, but among the marshals too. They know that this could be a trying contest. We wait for the cars to come down through Lowe's Corner for the first time on their final warming-up lap, prior to going back to the start, and they're headed through, in fact, by the Mercedes-Benz, similar to the car that Caracciolo drove. The Type 51 Bugatti off there down the hill, with the rest of the field following through. There's number 22 once more, immaculate as ever, and following behind him there, already displaying some understeer, Nick Mason, and a vicious little slide there at the tail of the field by somebody else as the four-wheel drive car goes through.
There's the Type 59 once again. A lot of power there in this car could cause a few problems, as it could with the 16-cylinder car. Behind comes a Ferrari, as sweeper up. Again, one of the great names of motorsport, and the only mark still to be competing in Grand Prix racing now, as it was then, because Alfa Romeo was at that time managed by Enzo Ferrari. And so straight into the start, and a beautiful start there by Martin Morris, and it's Martin Morris, in fact, who leads the cars away on this streaming wet track. Through goes the four-wheel drive car, not as far up perhaps as he would like to be, and everybody else filing through, looking now towards perhaps driving a careful race. This could well be a question of the survival of the fittest, as Maurice Trintignant brings up the rear of the field, and Morris leads through for the first time. Down the hill they come from the casino, round this tight left-hander, with up there in second place and going very hard. There's no doubt about the fact that we've got the Lord Raglan car of Venables Llewellyn, but we get a spinner in the shape of number 11, Rodney Felton, who in fact looked as if he could be a front runner. He has to wait for most of the traffic to go through. There's Martin Dean just ahead of the four-wheel drive car, which is trying to come through on the inside of him there, as we've got another spinner right in the middle of the corner there. It's Bernard Kane who has spun here at Lowe's and has got himself in fact up on the curb, and the car doesn't want to come off. Through now, going very hard and very fast, and followed by David Heimann there, went number 17, Venables Llewellyn. And a vicious slide there being corrected nicely by Geoffrey St. John. Four-wheel drive car going exceptionally well, and up there trying extremely hard at the moment, Alain de Cadenet in Danny Margulies' car number 7. That looks like being a very spectacular drive indeed. There's an awful lot of power in the 16-cylinder Bugatti there for a wet day, as number 28 Pat Marsh goes through. Behind him, hard on his tail, Maurice Souzet there in the white Bugatti, an unusual colour that, as Phil Hill there brings up the tail there in number 2, just ahead of Maurice Trintignant. As they come into Rascasse, the lead is taken by Venables Llewellyn, with a clutch problem there, tending to slow Martin Morris, who's heading for the pits. Hard on Morris's tail, David Heimann in that car that's been rebuilt and is now going exceptionally well. The four-wheel drive car there, hard on the tail of number 35, Bart Rossmann. Out goes the yellow flag once more for another spinner up the hill, as with the wheels in fact splayed out under understeer, Rodney Felton goes through, followed by the man who owns the car, Martin Dean, and a hand goes up as he pulls in to retire, an early stage of the race for him as well. Number 10 is Peter Agg. That car obviously repaired from its off-course excursion yesterday, and number 31, Richard Wills, goes through, with the rest of the field filing through behind in a spectacular manner. Number 2 there, Phil Hill, getting the tail hung out with Trintignant behind him. And hard on Trintignant's tail, number 23, Henri Charbon. Through comes Venables Llewellyn, exhibiting fine car control on this very wet day, with number 22, Heimann, behind him, also going strongly. There's no doubt at all that the wet weather is providing a great deal of thrills to spectators, even if they're wet, but as far as the drivers is concerned, is causing a great deal of problem for them on certain parts of the circuit. Through goes the four-wheel drive car. I wonder if it's going to drop oil today as it did in practice. Rodney Felton has a lot of time to make up and is obviously going to try hard to do so. But it's Venables Llewellyn once more who comes down towards Lowe's. Again, a superb line, braking hard and easing the car through, with hard on his tail now and driving well, David Heimann in second place. Heimann there, front end understeering, applying power, the tail just taking over before he clips the barrier. Behind there in third place, number 4, Geoffrey St. John. And another spinner there, and it's number 7. One would think that Alain de Cadenet would know better. Also in trouble, Rodney Felton once more. They've done it in tandem, but de Cadenet there pulls ahead across of Nick Mason, as up the road and out of sight for a moment or two goes Felton. Felton gets his reversing act together first, but since he's behind at the present time, de Cadenet, he may very well find that he's got him ahead to contend with as they come down to Lowe's. Let's see if they both can get round here. De Cadenet, a lot of understeer, and really finding it terribly difficult to get any adhesion at all, as Jackie Stewart would say. Gets it right, as back down the hill comes a very spectacular sight indeed. Well, there's a right way to do it, and there's a wrong way to do it, but Bernard Kane has got a way all of his own. Going past him through on the inside was Pat Marsh, as Kane comes all the way down towards Lowe's backwards. Now, this is a three-point turn with a difference. Engage first gear, a little opposite lock. No, we reverse a little bit further till the road's a bit wider. Now, can I do it in one, I ask myself. We'll engage first gear again, having backed up as close as we can to the barrier, try and get the tail to come round, and whoops, there we go. All's well that ends well, as William Shakespeare once wrote. Sir John Venables Llewellyn comes out of the chicane and streaks down the straight there, holding the car very nicely in a slide as it goes round the corner, followed by David Heimann. And hard now on Heimann's tail is some more opposition, closing in fast and hard. And this could be a fine duel as number 4, Geoffrey St John, tries to close the gap and take over second place. Also going well, number 34 there, Richard Pilkington, as befits a man with a lot of experience of cars of this type. And Martin Morris has returned to the fray, the clutch repaired, too far back perhaps to be anything of a figure to contend with in the race, but nevertheless still going well. Superbly controlled there as he accelerates up the hill. There's no doubt about Venables Llewellyn's determination to stay in the lead. St John there, flicking the tail out as he tries to close a little bit on David Heimann. The same piece of road once more, and it's 34, Richard Pilkington, getting the tail out with a yellow flag out, indicating that someone's had a moment. Hugh Conway Jr. also going well, and now making up a little bit of time, Alan de Cadenet, but out comes that tail once more, in for correction. Felton's Type 51 heads Nick Mason's 35B there. He's holding on well to that position and has Peter Agg close behind him. Out comes that oil flag once more. I wonder why. As through goes the Lord Raglan car, Venables Llewellyn very much in charge, with still behind him David Heimann in very hot pursuit. That oil flag indicates that somebody is dropping something on the circuit that no one likes to talk about. Who can it be? Number 12, Hugh Conway Jr. goes through, followed by number 7, de Cadenet once more, who's found some slippery spots without the oil. Down comes the leader once more towards Lowe's, using all the road, almost touching the curb there on the right-hand side, again on the inside, applying opposite lock, and you can see just how slippery it is there. And now for second and third men, David Heimann, followed by Geoffrey St John. Both of them troubled by tremendous understeer. Heimann looks as if he's going to make it. St John certainly hasn't, stops before he hits the barrier. The same applies to Heimann, and they set off again, more or less in tandem. Well, not quite the way they meant to do it, and he does indeed take a great deal of the pressure off Venables Llewellyn. Heimann in a safe and certain second place, and whoops, that's Geoffrey St John again, having a moment all of his own. Now, at this point in time, he seems to lose his presence of mind, but the marshals gain it for him and order him back into the car. 4 push power, and he regains the circuit once more. All he has to do now is to let the clutch in and start away again. And these conditions certainly are causing more and more problems for a lot of drivers. Here comes the four-wheel drive car, and that looks to have good adhesion, but we're rather suspicious that it might be he who's dropping the oil on the circuit. He's on the inside there of somebody else with a few problems. I didn't spot who that was. It was number 31 there, Richard Wills, who goes away having lost himself a little bit more ground. The rain is certainly giving an enormous number of problems to all the drivers today. Here, a long file of cars coming down now, round Lowe's, and looking as if they've got to take things very easily indeed. Through on the inside of the 16-cylinder car there goes one of the slightly easier to handle cars, and bringing up the back of that group, number 10 is Peter Agg once more. Venables Llewellyn goes through the chicane, now with an increased lead as a result of Heimann and St John's problems with Lowe's. And going hard and fast once more, Geoffrey St John, and this looks as if it could be a real battle now as the four-wheel drive car goes through, and there's number 7 on the outside there, de Cadenet, who's obviously been lapped but is trying to keep up with the leaders. John Howe with the 16-cylinder car, finding it a real handful in this, in spite of the fact that it gives more torque than it does really power. And 28, Pat Marsh goes through, looking fairly steady at the moment, followed by 29, Maurice Souze, who seems to have driven quite a sensible race, and Ian Preston behind him, who usually is further up than this. Maurice Trintignant in and among that little group, as through comes the leader once more. And this is a magnificent performance in the rain that is now coming down even harder than before. Heimann there, concentration on his face, something that he can't afford to lose today after that incident yesterday when he's so well placed. And there is 34, Richard Pilkington, in a similar guise. This really has proved to be the survival of the fittest, and a very quick flick on the wheel keeps St John on the course, as through comes the Type 53. And that looks to me as if it is definitely dropping oil, and maybe the reason why we've got a problem on the circuit, and trying to go through on the outside of him there is de Cadenet. Number 11, Rodney Felton, making up time, and you can see the amount of water that the drivers have got to contend with as there's blue flag out now. Bart Rossman comes through, and the blue flag out for the battle behind, in fact, which has just got on the inside of it and in charge, Pat Marsh getting himself ahead of Henri Chambon. That beautifully controlled leading car, number 17, Venables Llewellyn, still very much in charge, and try as David Heimann can, and does, he cannot close the gap. Out there with the tail sliding a little bit, number 34 is trying hard, and that's Richard Pilkington. And behind him, snaking there as he tries to accelerate, closing on Pilkington's tail, Jeffrey St John again. And we can see the oil coming out of Murray Smith's Type 53. Through there, number 30, Hamish Moffat, driving a somewhat subdued race. And there is number 1, Martin Morris, still making up time, but too far back to have any effect, as we said. Over the curve there, Phil Hill, the 1961 world champion, finding things a bit difficult today. Americans never did like the wet very much. But these conditions proving very difficult indeed, even for the leader, who almost comes to a halt there around Lowe's. Let's watch and see if David Heimann gets through safely this time. Awful lot of understeer coming out, but he controls it nicely by keeping the power off until the car is more or less straight. Now, what about third man through? Just about making his way through, a lot more understeer, applying the power that much earlier, and there's the four-wheel drive car, and you can see those oil fumes coming out underneath the car. The grip is good, however, and that car could have gone well had it been healthy. Another problem there for Hamish Moffat, unusual to see him in a rather a mess, but he gets it all together and is passed by Rodney Felton. But as far as this race is concerned, it's got to be the story of one man, Sir John Venables Llewellyn, in the Lord Raglan Type 51 Bugatti. He drove the car for the first time last year. He's well known as an ERA exponent, but has taken to the Bugatti like a duck to water, if you'll excuse the expression. He's certainly put on a fantastic performance of car control and looks to be very much in charge as he comes out of Rascasse. So away he goes, this 1934 Type 51. Through the water there, which is getting ever increasing on the circuit. David Heimann comes through the same section, and he's taking things now very carefully indeed. He wants to hold on to that hard-won second place. Jeffrey St John might have other ideas, but he's got a long way to go to catch up. The Terrible Twins follow number 31, Richard Wills. Bringing up the rear of that duo, Peter Abb. He gives a wave of the hand as through on the inside goes a hard charger in the shape of Rodney Felton, who was very much a fancied man at the start of this race. That spin, however, early on has dropped him back, and he's got a lot of catching up to do, and explaining to Martin Dean, come to that. Phil Hill, finding these wet weather conditions still difficult to come to terms with. He's now left Trintignant behind and is followed by Bernard Kane. Look at the understeer there on number 7. Alan de Cadenet, very determined indeed, thoroughly enjoying himself, if not terribly effective. Sideways flick, catches it nicely, sideways the other way, and provides an interesting spectator sport anyway as far as the crowd's concerned. Number 12 there, Hugh Conway Jr., is followed by 31, Wills once more. And those two places look as if they could be in danger. Number 11 is Felton, and he's now up ahead of them, and is certainly looking as if he's climbing steadily back through the field, as number 1, Martin Morris, is still trying his own way back. 19 there is Bernard Kane. This has been a disappointing race for him. He usually does so well at the British circuits, and Monaco, usually a place where he goes well, has been a problem.
It's also been a problem too for John Howe. The tail out, but nicely controlled, Phil Hill is now coming to terms with wet weather. He never liked it, however, when he was driving Ferraris. Number 17, the leader, gets it almost sideways and all but loses it there as he comes round lows. Let's just watch and see what David Heimann does. Once again, that tight line in, leaving the power off till the last possible moment, so the car drifts round. Now the man behind him, Geoffrey St. John, he's been spectacular before, a lot of understeer here, and somehow or other collects it together before he hits the curb on the right-hand side of the road. This is Maurice Trintignant, the French driver, driving superbly as always, but way back down the field in these conditions after a poor practice time. And 34 there, Richard Pilkington, who's going better at this stage than he has at any other in the race. And here's that fine duel that's been going on all the time between Felton and the three guys behind him, and Felton goes wide there, and on go the brakes of Richard Will's car. Felton scrabbles round, so do the other two behind, and a grandstand view for everybody else of what was going on there. But somehow or other, maintaining his progress, Felton hung on. Number 35, Bart Rossmann once more, very sideways, very narrow tyres, and he gets the car back. The Type 37 proving particularly handleable here. And Helmut Schellenberg grabs at the handbrake to try and get the back end to lock up to help him round a little bit. Doesn't really help much, but he makes it all the same. John Howe follows through with the 16-cylinder car. A real handful on this circuit, as up comes the leader once more. Venables Llewellyn still driving calmly, and behind him, a fine drive by Heimann looks as if it's going to be rewarded. He's in that second place and is unlikely to lose it now. Pilkington, and behind him, Geoffrey St. John really charging hard, head well down into the left-hander there, making a tremendous effort now to catch up. Coming towards us now, Alain de Cadenet once again, and the four-wheel drive car behind him, and just watch those front wheels there tugging at the driver's arms. Braskas, and through comes David Heimann, holding on to that second place and not put off at all by the conditions. Huge understeering slides, number 7, de Cadenet there, and now the tail is out and almost looking at him with an overcorrection there, but finally getting it straight. The marshals are applauding, the spectators are applauding, and I suppose it's one way to keep warm on a very cold, wet day, but certainly there are a lot of thrills as far as the circuit's concerned. Kane, Mason, and Ag bringing up the rear of this trio. These three cars treating the conditions now very steadily indeed, as they're getting much, much worse. You can see the puddle forming there, right on line on the inside of the circuit, and being kicked up as the cars go through, getting deeper and deeper every lap, and there an effort made to miss it by number 10, Peter Ag. Still, Venables Llewellyn goes on his winning way. The car control here, absolutely amazing. He doesn't even look as if he's going to put a foot wrong. But the same, too, applies to David Heimann, who's driven a very sensible race and still holds on to his second place. The excitement, however, is for third place, because Geoffrey St. John has got himself up past Richard Pilkington. This is the place where he made a mistake before, but he gets it right this time and holds on to third as the car set off now to complete lap 5. Number 7. De Cadenet, right on the limit, collects it again. It looked for a moment as if he was going to lose it, as number 34, Pilkington now back in 4th place, goes through. And there's number 3, Maurice Trintignant, arms crossed, first one way, then the other, exhibiting fine car control as sliding on towards the barrier goes Rodney Felton once more. He doesn't hit anything, collects it back together again, takes a glance behind and sets off. The conditions, however, are proving really trying. They've deteriorated to a degree that they're no longer acceptable to the marshals. The lead, however, safely in the hands of John Venables Llewellyn, with in second place there David Heimann, and here's the four-wheel drive car dropping oil, there's no doubt about that. Here's Richard Pilkington in the 1935 ex-Veyron 51. It's highly likely that we're going to have an early checkered flag. Wet races at Monaco haven't happened here for some time, but when they do, it's a circuit that's extremely difficult, because although a road circuit, the drainage is not by any means the best, and the surface somehow or other causes a great deal of problem to most drivers.
Through goes number 21 there, Helmut Schellenberg. A hand up to acknowledge a sign from the marshals, who have a yellow flag out, and out goes the checkered flag to an early end after some 6 laps. There's no doubt, however, about the hero of this race. The car number 17, the driver Sir John Venables Llewellyn, the winner. In second place, rather aptly we think, car number 22, David Heimann, in the car that won here in Louis Chiron's hands in 1931. In third place, Geoffrey St John, a tremendous drive up through the field after having had some problems early on in this long chassis Type 51, the last one ever built for Conan Doyle. And then the ever-spectacular Alain de Cadenet there, going extremely well in Danny Margolies' car. And in spite of the slide, he takes that to fourth place, with Richard Pilkington in fifth. So the Lord Raglan Type 51 comes up towards victory and towards the presentation. No one can be more satisfied with this race than Lord Raglan himself, a fine enthusiast who's seen regularly in this car in sprints and hill climbs. And so, 4 laps sooner than many would have liked, round goes the winning car towards the presentation. There's Martin Morris, that car happily restored to the circuit after that clutch problem, and has gone well, in fact, towards the end of the race. 35 there, Bart Rossmann. There's number 19 going through, Bernard Kane. As we said, obviously a little disappointed with the way his car has gone. The 4-wheel drive car goes through. David Heimann pulls up behind Sir John Venables Llewellyn, who gets the William Grover Williams Cup, the same cup that was given to Grover Williams when he won the 1929 race. To the strains of the British National Anthem, pictures are taken of a unique event. Ivan Dutton, engineer to David Heimann, congratulates him on his second place, and Alain de Cadenet talks to Uwe Hucke. Meanwhile, the only surviving son of Ettore Bugatti, Michel Bugatti, looks on, obviously delighted with the race. The laurels are lifted from the shoulders of Sir John Venables Llewellyn for the presentation of one of those special watches that were promised to the winner. The SSK Mercedes-Benz leads round the cars on a parade of honour. A fine end to a superb race here at Monaco. The curtain raiser to a Grand Prix that perhaps is going to be talked about for years afterwards. But one thing will remain in everybody's mind. The Bugatti race at Monaco in 1984. Truly representative of a tremendous French marque that will go down in history as more than just a motor car, a work of art. A great deal of the work that went into this event and the arranging of it has got to go down to Uwe Hucke. To him we are grateful. Today we have seen more Grand Prix Bugattis on a circuit than ever before. And the winner, the 1934 Type 51 of Lord Raglan, and the driver, a British driver, Sir John Venables Llewellyn. The end of the Grand Prix de Voiture de Course Historique at Monaco.
And the other thing about all this is, if it hadn't been for David Heimann, I don't think we'd have ever arrived here. Because when I bought the farm, he said to me, Ivan, everybody has a point in their life where they have to stick their neck out. And he said, I think you've just reached that point. And it was fabulous advice.